All right then, I've erased all my arcs. I'm going to come back and I'm going to use another tool. And this one is this little guy here. It's a rectangle. It's pretty easy, but if you look at the description here, it says creates a rectangular polyline. So all we're doing is we're automating the creation of a rectangle, and that rectangle is a polyline. That's all it is. So if I click here and click on my icon, for a rectangle, I believe it's REC at the command prompt. Left click, and I can make a rectangle either taller than it is wide or wider than it is tall. Now there is no way to hold a constrain key, hold down a shift key and make it a square. That's not how these things work. However, remember the last time I came over here on the polar tracking and did a right click and I changed my constraint to 45 degrees. This is the closest thing that I have to a constrain is along that 45 degrees. Now what happens if, let me back up a second. You see how my coordinates are reading polar 9.1965 at, or at an angle of 45 degrees. Well, I don't know what length each side of that square is going to be. I can't easily determine some of these lengths and distances, but what I can do is I can specify the corner points and I can manually type these in. So I can, at the command prompt, I can say 12 and then press the tab key and I can say 12 again and I can push return or hit the space bar. Likewise, REC, I'm just going to right click, I'm just going to click right here on the end. And let's say I want it, let's see, 2, 7. Now what happened? That is a very good question. That is peculiar. I was not expecting that behavior. I'm going to erase that and I'm going to start again. Rectangle. We go there. Specify the other corner. 2. Tab. 7. Enter. That is unusual. I'd have to investigate why it was snapping or why it was temporarily drawing over here when we're actually drawing right here. But you can see that we did make an object that was 2 inches wide and 7 inches tall. Another way to get that exact same point that might be a little more evident is we can always click anywhere and we can tell it at, which is if I hold the shift 2, if I enter that, it will force AutoCAD to recognize he's about to enter a new set of coordinates relative to his first coordinates. So if I wanted to make it -4, which is going towards the left on the x-axis, and then I'll hit the comma, excuse me, and then I can say it's 5 units tall and then push return. There's a lot of different ways that we can input distances and relative sizes and things of that nature. I really do urge you to experiment, play around, find what works. Anything that you can find online, if you go Google AutoCAD cheat sheet, I'm sure you'll find a lot of material there. Okay, rectangles are pretty easy. And like I said, it's just a polyline. It just happens to be a polyline that's already closed. So all those tools that I used before to edit my polyline in the other video, I can use on any of these, and I can use on this because it's just a polyline. So there we go. So that's a rectangle. Now you notice we have another little drop down here. We can use a polygon. Now polygon can be anywhere from 3 to 480 million sides. It all depends on how many sides that you want here. For the purposes of this video, I'm going to use a 5-sided polygon. Specify the center of the polygon, and I'm just going to pick a point. That went by a little too quick. I need to do that again. POL for polygon. Pick the number of sides. Now let's make it 6 sides instead of 5. Pick a point of the polygon. And here you'll notice I have an option. It can be inscribed in my circle, or it can be circumscribed around my circle. So what we're doing is we're establishing a center point and a radius point, and the polygon will be drawn about that circle, that implied circle. Right now I'm going to say inscribed. So you'll notice that I'm drawing on the vertex of this polygon rather. And let's give it a radius of 4. So to show you the difference, I'm going to create a couple lines here. Create a line, and I'm going to draw a circle. So how do which brings us to an interesting point. I need to draw right on the midpoint of this line, but you can see that my little, my snaps are, AutoCAD is trying to be helpful. It says, I assume you want to draw on the end point of this line, but I actually want to draw on the midpoint of that line. I'm going to come down here to my snap settings, right click, and say midpoint. I want to include that. Now you can see I've added a midpoint. So I can draw to the end, I can draw to any midpoint, anywhere. So snap here, give it a radius of 4. So you can see if this circle was inscribed, and this circle is, and this is our imaginary circle, I come back to Polygon, which again I can either bring my mouse way over here, you saw in the mouse over what it is I'm trying to show you now. Equilateral closed polygon. The difference between the inscribed and the circumscribed is shown below. So I'm going to come over here, POL, polygon. And once again, I want to snap on the center, but it's not allowing me to snap on the center just yet because I need to enter the number of sides, 6 sides. And now I can snap the center. I want it circumscribed about my circle, and it's 4. So you can see how the circumscribed polygon and an inscribed polygon differ based on the tangent points versus the vertex where they meet. So that's a basic polygon. That's a rectangle and a polygon. I'm going to erase these objects. We're going to go to the next item in the list, which is an ellipse. An ellipse, the base point of the base way to create an ellipse in AutoCAD is you start with the center, and you give it one axis, and then you give it the opposite axis. It's pretty straightforward. When you highlight an ellipse to change it, you can modify these axes after the fact. Another option that we have, excuse me, is instead of specifying the center point, you can specify the entire length of one axis, and then the half length of the other axis. So cross one way, like that. And you don't have to be constrained. You can draw them at strange angles, and AutoCAD will try and keep track of things for you. The last option that we have is an elliptical arc. Specify an endpoint, draw another endpoint, draw the length of that second axis, and now we're going to start, and just like a circle wants to start at 0 degrees and then move in a positive direction. So I'm going to start at one side, and then it's going to draw in a positive direction in my polar coordinates. And then a left click to complete. Now when I highlight an elliptical arc, I can still come by and I can modify the pieces of this arc, but you'll notice I have 2 other points here. You notice these little arrows. I can come by and I can adjust how much of that arc is being shown of the ellipse. I can modify those after the fact as well. And I believe you can do the same with an arc. or at least you can do something similar. Obviously, if I hold it, I can just stretch this out, but I lose the radius point unless, highlight, don't click anything yet, I can come down and say lengthen. And now I can change the angle that this arc begins at. Lengthen. Also, if I come here over the midpoint, I can stretch, which means I'm changing the radius point of this arc, but I'm leaving the endpoints where they are. Press escape. Or I can change the radius of the arc, keep the included angle the same. And you can see how that's modifying my arc there. So that's ellipses, arcs, polygons, rectangles. Here we go. I'm going to erase these. We'll see you on the next lesson.